one of the most NFC South games that you will ever see. Buccaneers 23, Falcons 20. I don't quite – I kind of actually want to talk about the Falcons first. I know the Bucs won this game, but – man, the Falcons were wild. I mean, the final touchdown that they got there, which was a Penix scramble, they had to work hard for that touchdown, man. It was a weird sequence down there. Can't even really describe it on the show. It was one of those you had to be there moments. But one thing that stuck out to me was the Falcons went super pass heavy in this game, Chris. 48 dropbacks, 6 Michael Penix scrambles to 22 running back runs. I definitely did not expect that out of the Falcons in week 1.
No, and that's the most dropbacks for Penix in a single game since he's took over. Now I get it, that's only his 4th start for the Falcons, but still seeing him do that. But also the change that I noticed out of that game was the fact that he wasn't really throwing downfield. Now I get the fact that they didn't have Darnell Mooney in the game. Drake London came out, like he was in and out as well, but only 6.9 average air yards per attempt for Penix, and that was a complete shift from where he was at last year. It was around 9.5 to 10 air yards per attempt. But also on top of that, we already talked about the offensive line concerns for the Falcons. Only 1 sack. I mean, that's really interesting for a guy that is more or less a pocket passer, seeing him be able to mitigate pressure either by getting the ball out faster or the scrambling and the rushing portion for it, like that he added to his game or he has to his game. I was really encouraged by at least that type of performance where he knows how to feel out the pocket and be able to get rid of the ball on time and to his receivers. And yet, didn't have Darnell Mooney. Drake London got banged up. He's really working with Ray McLeod, Casey Washington, and of course Kyle Pitts doing his thing, which I called on this show maybe just a few weeks ago saying he was going to be pretty solid pass catcher to pick up. Just throwing it out there. I'm just saying, but still, I think that's where it was really encouraging to see Penix able to at least get through this game, showing that he is the franchise quarterback that the Falcons really needed to have.
Yeah, I mean, just got to get Drake London out of there, got to get Darnell Mooney out of there. Then Kyle Pitts can finally start to do some things. But no, he had some good catches early on in this game. He was an active part of the offense for sure. But you mentioned the lack of downfield passing. I mean, Penix did not complete a single pass, and he only had 7 passes total that traveled over 15 air yards on the day. And some of them were definitely some pretty rough misses. But a lot of times I just thought he had to get that ball out quick, and he is – I mean, Bijan Robinson go for 100 in this game through the air. That was because Penix, this is who he is. He will read out the downfield stuff, but man, he is willing to get to the check down pretty quickly. And obviously, you put that thing in Bijan Robinson's hand, he can do something with it after, as we saw multiple times in this game. One thing to know about the Falcons, you mentioned this, Drake London left the game late, was not on the field for the Falcons for the final drive. Believe he suffered a hip pointer, according to Ian Rappaport. It's not expected to be a long-term issue, but we don't know if he will miss any time, which is a shame because I know he didn't get any downfield looks. I had somebody tweet at me today, like, you better come on your show and start talking about how Drake London is the new Wan'Dale Robinson, which was offensive to me, obviously. Tough. And I will not be saying that, but he did get 15 targets and he didn't do much with those 15 targets from a yardage standpoint. So, so he's not Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm not going to say that. That is offensive, but 15 targets for Drake London. That's what we expected him to just get funneled looks. So we'll have to track his health throughout the course of the next week. Pretty weird game from the Bucs offense, Chris. Mayfield just kind of felt off to me all day.
Yeah, and that's where it was pretty interesting to see how Raheem Morris dialed up a lot of the defensive looks that kind of put Baker Mayfield on his back foot. 40.5% pressure rate for Baker Mayfield, and also seeing him having to push the ball downfield and farther. It was almost the opposite of between those two quarterbacks, where we typically saw Penix pushing the ball downfield, Baker Mayfield targeting kind of the intermediate parts of the field in order to let his receivers react to the catch. Exact opposite. Baker Mayfield averaged just around 10 air yards per attempt on passes. That's the single high mark for Baker Mayfield, at least between last season and the start of this season. But also, the efficiency was also down. I mean, 36.4% passing success rate. That's a career low for him. I mean, also let's look at the passing distribution for him. Mike Evans, of course, got his, and we already talked about Egbuka, but seeing your guy, one of your favorite wide receivers, Sterling Shepard, getting into the mix, I'm wondering if that's more of a Cade Otton thing, because we didn't see a ton of usage for the tight end. But still, I think this is more of a week one trying to adjust to what the defense is giving them. But let's see if we get another week back. Otten doesn't have a setback and he gets more involved. And of course, seeing the looks to both Bucky Irving, Sean Tucker, and like those types of guys, I think this offense might just need another week to get to see how they can get their feet back under them, because the loss of Liam Cohen, I think, is somewhat of a concern here. And I see some of that playing out in week 1, but let's see how things shake out for them once they face the Texans in week 2.
Yeah, I think Tristan Wirf's absence was felt in this one because you mentioned they threw a lot of blitzes at Baker Mayfield, and they threw a lot of like man coverage on the back of those blitzes, at least from what I could tell on the broadcast, which isn't perfect, but still, to me, that was a difference, because usually it's a lot of those like soft blitz looks on the back there for Atlanta. So that was definitely a different look for me, and obviously it's a new defensive coordinator coming in there with Jeff Ulbrich, but not the type of defense necessarily I thought we'd get from Atlanta, and maybe that fooled the Bucs a little bit too, but you certainly felt the absence of Tristan Wirfs, and I think Baker's a good quarterback. He has turned around his career, there's no question, but if you could put heat on him, he's going to make some mistakes. And you mentioned Cade Otton. There was a wide open miss to Cade Otton down the field. There was a few other just like brutal misses from Baker Mayfield. Ultimately does not have a great completion percentage in this game. He completes 53% of his passes, and I think some of those mistakes were on him, but still 3 touchdowns you get out of Baker Mayfield in this one. If you played him in fantasy, you love the 39 yards as a scrambler as well, but definitely the offensive line and just maybe some of the small steps back without having Liam Cohen are on my radar, both from a run and pass game in this one. But it was a really fun game, and certainly Emeka Egbuka coming out of there, I think establishing himself as like a must-start player in fantasy. Like, I've got friends texting me like, I'm benching Nico Collins for Emeka Egbuka next week, which, you know, look, yeah, but hey, man, I mean, listen, the guy scores 2 touchdowns, people are going to say it. I'm not going to come out and be like ranking Emeka Egbuka over Nico Collins next week necessarily, but I do think like this guy he's in an awesome role in an awesome offense, and he is a great player. I mean, some of those just like subtle breaks on the deep in-breaking routes, or like just the subtle shifts at the break point of those in-breaking routes, man, that's exactly what I thought he'd be as a pro, the exact role I thought he'd play. So definitely a good like check box. Is there like what's the range you think weekly rankings next week for Emeka Egbuka?
I would say probably around like top 20. I would say like in that like 18 to 22-ish, like somewhere around there. That's where I'm guessing folks are going to have him for next week.
I think that makes a ton of sense. All right, that does it for the games we care most about. Now, let's get into the games we sort of care about here, Chris. Starting with 49ers 17, Seahawks 13. What we learned from this one, not the best Brock Purdy game by any means. He threw up some ducks, at some interceptable passes, but CMC and Ricky Pearsall still hit. Ricky Pearsall got over 100 yards. Christian McCaffrey got over 100 yards. 71% of the running back touches after all the, hand-wringing that we had and everything. The 2 guys out there that played the full game, we'll get to the injuries for a second, those guys still got there, even if, like I said, definitely a shaky game from Brock Purdy against that very good Seahawks defense.
Yeah, and I think that was part of the concern for Purdy coming into this game, is that it's not just the loss of his pass catchers like during the game itself. We'll talk about like George Kittle and, of course, Juwan Jennings like coming up lame as well. But it's just the defensive front and the secondary for Seattle. And we knew that there was going to be something of a tough out for a couple of their pass catchers. So he would need to rely on a guy like CMC and also Ricky Pearsall on the interior. So seeing that type of connection still being strong, and of course, Christian McCaffrey getting through the entire game without any sort of setback, I didn't see too many tweets or anything along those lines of CMC headed to the blue tent, which any tweet involving blue tent is probably the worst thing that you want to hear on Thursdays, Sundays, or Mondays. But still, we didn't see or hear anything about that for CMC. And of course, with Ricky Pearsall, having him shine as I'd say for right now, their wide receiver 1 until we hear more about Jennings. I think those are the types of things that you would want to hear, you'd want to see from a development standpoint for a guy like Pearsall. But let's give another week. Tough matchup this week, a tough divisional matchup. And also one of the things I was thinking about for this game is that the level of familiarity between the teams. Like, let's toss out the fact that it's a divisional rival or divisional matchup. Was it Clint Kubiak on one side? His brother, was it Clay Kubiak is also, he's on the 49ers. Yeah, so there's familiarity there. I mean, Robert Saleh coming back, and of course, how many times that he's been a part of, or like his familiarity with the Seahawks. I mean, there's just so many connections between those two franchises that this was going to be another one of those rock fighting, mudslinging type of matchups that wasn't going to lend itself to a high scoring type of affair. But still, I'm hoping that this is going to be one of those games where each team can really reassess where it's at from an offensive structure standpoint. And also hopefully they get each of their pass catchers back, like from an injury standpoint, especially the 49ers, such that next week they come out really guns blazing. Once they don't have to really face each other, it's not going to be another divisional match for them.
Yeah, it's a great point about the familiarity. And like Mike McDonald has the Seahawks head coaching job because his scheme and his approach to defense does really well against these Shanahan and McVay offenses. That is the reason he is the head coach of the team. So not surprising that he had Purdy pressured on 57% of his dropbacks, which according to NFL Pro is the highest of his entire career. So a lot going on there. Just the injuries continue to hit the 49ers as well. George Kittle suffered a hamstring injury in the first half of this game, did not return. Jawan Jennings has a shoulder injury. According, I think, to Matt Mayako after the game, he could not even lift his arm. He's got, again, shoulder injury. They're both going to undergo MRI, so we'll have to keep up with what those guys are able to do. But some really good plays from Ricky Pierce on this one, someone that I think is a must-start fantasy player going forward. On the Seahawks, I think we learned two things. Number one, the Seahawks backfield, I think, Chris, we got to adjust to this. This was a big signal. I think it looks like a committee. Kenneth Walker, 13 touches, 3 targets. Zach Charbonnet, 12 carries, no targets, but played in the 2-minute drill and got the work inside the 5. So if you drafted Zach Charbonnet, you're feeling great. Like, not only do I have this injury contingency upside, but I also might have a weekly, like what the heck flex type of starter. But how are you feeling if you took Kenneth Walker in the 4th round, Chris Allen?
Not so good. I would say that he is probably one of the guys that you thought at the very least was going to be a workhorse-ish type of back, where he would have mostly early down work and potentially working on the goal line. And that was Charbonnet that got the 1-yard plunge for the Seahawks this week. So I would have many alarm bells ringing in my head that this is not the running back that you drafted. This is almost the same scenario where we're projecting the type of workload for Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, as there would be like a 1A, 1B type situation where we were thinking there was going to be a clear RB1, RB2 delineation between Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. But seeing this type of workload and this split between the two of them, my hope, the only thing that I'm coping with right now, Matt, is the fact that maybe there's still some lingering pain for Kenneth Walker because of the foot issue that he was dealing with throughout the back end of the preseason. Maybe that's it. And that's why they want to give Charbonnet a little bit more work. And maybe if it goes away, or they figure out a way to manage some of that pain throughout the regular season, we can see a bit more work for Kenneth Walker. But that's the only thing I can hang on to at this point. Otherwise, we are in a full-blown committee. We approach this from the wrong way, but still, there's still a chance for Kenneth Walker to break off some of those longer runs like he has wont to do in previous seasons. So we can see some of those game breaker type of explosive runs from Walker, and he can wind up getting in end zone at some point. It's just this 1 week. Let's get to week 2, see how the touch share shakes out, and go from there.
The other thing I think we learned from the Seahawks offense is Jaxon Smith-Nijiba is going to dominate those targets, baby. Sam Darnold threw to him on 13 of his 23 pass attempts, good for a 56.5% target share, which I haven't double-checked it, but it's got to be, if it's not the highest, it's got to be right there in terms of wide receiver target share from the week. And this was like, that game that Ladd McConkey had against the Texans in the playoffs. This was like that. Yeah. No other Seahawks pass catcher had more than 15 yards in this game. So I just think this is something that people overthought a little bit with Jaxon Smith-Nijiba, that like when there's a number one guy, when there's an alpha in this like Kubiak offense, that guy just gets peppered with targets. And JSN didn't have a perfect game in this one. He had actually like right after I said, oh man, I'm really impressed by Sam Darnold and Jaxon Smith-Nijiba's chemistry. He like had a fumble and then lost 8 yards on like a fake, I think what it was supposed to be a pass, but ultimately just gets dirted. So again, not a perfect day for Jaxon Smith-Nijiba, but that like usage in the pass game, big stock up for him coming out of that one.